Alright, hi everyone. It's great to see the hundreds of people here who've attended
There's so many of them.
Yeah, Cardboard Game Jam. I wish we could show you everybody who's attending. So no, we've had a fun weekend of creating games. Rick and me, Aryan, have been sort of co-hosting the Cardboard Game Jam. Rick from the MIT Game Lab. And I'm from the Game Makers Guild. What we do is we create a space where game designers and game designer wannabes can come and playtest their prototypes. We always look for more playtesters as well, so if you're interested in learning a little bit more about this, go to www.gamemakersguild.com or just go to the meetup page and go to Game Makers Guild and you'll see all the events we're organizing.
And the MIT Game Lab, we're here to help people make games, both doing education about how to make games, but also what games can be used for. And today was just a game jam, so people coming together and making games, meeting new people, forming up teams, and coming up with really cool creative things. So today we've got 6 games we're presenting to you, but we actually made, how many, 9 games this week?
Yeah, there were 9 games we made.
Yeah, we had a lot of people. I think we topped out at 27 yesterday.
Something like that.
So we had a 2-day jam. Yesterday our jammers worked from about 10 a.m. We did a couple of workshops, and then I think we gave them the theme at what, like 1?
Something like that,
yeah. Like 1 o'clock. And then they went from 1 to 10 p.m. Making games. We sent them home because we wanted to go to bed.
Yep.
Came back here at 10 in the morning, and it's
coffee.
about 4 o'clock now. So under 24 hours, so pretty tight deadlines to make a game. What was our theme?
Our theme was co-op games, and we actually added a couple of constraints to encourage people to create games in a certain direction. So one of the constraints is no quarterbacking, and quarterbacking being...
I don't know, what is quarterbacking?
Well, that's what quarterbacking is. Yeah, so one of the problems that you have in cooperative games is that one player knows the game through and through and will tell all the new players what to do constantly, and it was basically a lot of fun.
What was our other one? That wasn't yours, that was mine.
Yes.
The other constraint was actually very difficult. It was no sci-fi, no fantasy, no horror, specifically no generic sci-fi, generic fantasy, or generic horror, but also no trading, economy, infrastructure, medieval, basically no Euro games, and no Ameritrash games. So try to come up with something new.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we did it.
I think, the games up here, but also like the original pitches were all pretty good and took in those themes.
All right. So we're going to get out of the way, and Aaron's going to take over.
All right. So quick heads up. We have the 6 teams presenting. Each team is going to get 10 minutes to talk mostly about the process of the game. The postmortem process is about what did you do well. What did you learn, and what was interesting? And that can be about the game, which you'll be seeing through the document cam or the regular camera, or anything you want to talk about. I'll give the teams a heads up if there's 1 minute remaining, and let's hear for the green team revolt.
What's going on, guys?
Yeah, I'm Tim.
Dan.
And this is Green Team Revolt. So the original pitch, and we kind of built around this. So you are the Planeteers, and Captain Planet has gone rogue. He just got really fed up with all the pollution going on the planet, so he started just killing people, taking people out, just trashing everything around. So it's Planeteers like, all right, you gotta stop. We take care of this guy. So you're using your powers to stop Captain Planet and kind of minimize the damage that's being happening to the environment. So.
Yeah, so the idea that Captain Planet is the environment, but at the same time you still need to kill him, so you're trying to damage him but not destroy the environment at the same time. Because you also don't want Captain Pollution to win in this situation.
So
the way the situation is, there's 5 Planeteers: Earth, Fire, Wind, Water, Heart. Heart being the best, obviously. And everyone has a deck. You have a deck of 10 cards. At a time you're going to have a hand of 3. You're going to play 1, draw 1. The idea being that each deck kind of has a very specific thing that it does, but it's very hard to tell someone what to do because the constraint's so tight. So it's very much about understanding and manipulating how you're going to draw through your cards and knowing when to hold on to something and when to not.
So we're going to start off with just a little practice round going on. So
we're going to take all 5 of these hands and just going to play through them. So you see with the board here, what's going to happen is, starting with the first player, we're just going to drop this little token to indicate which Planeteer is starting the turn. We always start with Earth, because that's how things work. They're going to play a card to the first part of the queue, and then Fire to the second, Wind to the third, War to the fourth, and Heart to the fifth. And then when this turn, after this turn ends, we'll then just move to Fire and go on that way. So Earth is going to play a +1 damage card. The idea being that we're going to attack Captain Planet. And then what's Fire?
Oh, we forgot the first round.
All right.
So first thing we're supposed to do is tell you where Captain Planet actually is at the time. So we start off with he's fighting on a volcano area, very fire-based kind of thing. So we all understand that all damage deals 2 to the environment instead of 1.
So the idea being that each location is going to have a negative effect for us. Just kind of a way, something we have to fight against. So currently, right now, all damage deals damage to the environment, but right now we're adding an additional effect of doubling that instead of normally it does 1, right now it's going to do 2. So this might be a turn where we want to like mitigate how much we attack Captain Planet versus another turn where that might be something very different.
So the idea is we're going to attack Captain Planet. There's possible collateral damage, and so each element has its own opposite or a partial opposite. So if we happen, in this case, to do water damage against Captain Planet, there's going to be extra collateral damage because it's in the volcano.
Yeah. So we're going to do this as Earth. We're going to just drop a fire card. Quickly, Wind.
Yeah, that's double.
Yeah. All right. So Fire's going to play double current damage being dealt. Wind's going to play +1 wind damage. Do +1 water damage because fuck the environment, right? +1 heart damage. So we played all 5 cards. Then what's going to happen is we're going to resolve them in order, starting from the beginning, starting slot 1. So we always start doing 1 damage of the type of the player who started the turn. So we got 1 earth damage, then +1 earth damage, that's 2. Double the current damage being dealt, so we now have 4 earth damage. Then wind, water, and heart. So we're actually going to do 7 damage. So we tally that up. First we deal it to the environment. The environment has 30 life. Captain Planet has 20. So we're going to do 7 to the environment. Captain Planet is then going to retaliate in some way.
We're going to double it, don't we?
Well, right. So because we dealt water damage, it deals an additional 2. And because we also dealt heart damage, we're going to get an additional +1.
And we did another 1 damage, so that's another 7 damage to the environment. See, we really... We went strong, and the environment's suffering for it.
So Captain Planet, next turn, he's actually going to spend it in 2 locations. So we're going to draw 2 of those cards and have 2 negative effects. And then we're going to tally how much damage we did to Captain Planet, which was 7. So he's now at 13, as is our environment. And if we keep up at this pace, it is going to be terrible. So we're going to discard all these cards. Every player is going to draw more cards, so they're going to still have 3 in their hand. And they're just going to keep going like that. Each card has 10 in their deck. Once you have to reshuffle, you're going to shuffle, take the top card, remove from the game. So there is so if the environment is destroyed, you lose. If Captain Planet dies, you win. But if any player runs out of cards in their deck, you also lose. Just to give a point where the game won't go on into infinity. Of Captain Planet healing, us saving the environment, so on and so forth.
So just for the next round real quick. So we're fighting in the city. This is the heart ability. And discard the top card of the heart deck. So,
so this one, it's just Heart's going to go to his deck and going to take it, just discard it. So it's going to bring that end faster, kind of limit his actions. But each round turn is going to go that way. It's going to be different abilities. Like another Captain Planet power. This one is remove a card in the queue from the game. So after all this happens, maybe Earth just loses its card and never gets to play it again. And that's essentially the game. We went through a lot of iterations with this. I'd say this is the 4th major stage the game has been in. And she was calculating damage.
Yeah.
So there's a couple there's a lot of like deal damage, heal the environment. Like right here, Earth has a power. Captain Planet's not going to attack this turn. So there's only 1 in the deck. And it's just really special. Like we need to save this for a turn where we really need to do something about it.
So that's like 2 fire damage plus we heal 4, which is nice.
Yeah. And we should probably talk about like the rest of the process. Because the rest of the turns are pretty much, it's very straightforward turn structure.
So again, we kind of resolve this queue and we do some damage.
Yeah.
The idea is to take out Captain Planet before you destroy the environment. So.
Yeah. So what did you guys do well?
So we actually worked really well together. I came into this group, there was a 3rd member who wasn't able to be here today. They both had brainstormed this idea and I hadn't, and coming into it and trying to kind of understand their vision for it and kind of work through it with them without And we were really lucky we never clashed on anything. There was a lot of discussion how we thought different mechanics should function different ways, but they always went in very positive directions. Our only real downfall, we talked a lot more than we should have. There's a lot more iterations we could have taken.
We didn't
discussed
kind of
mechanics a lot
rapid
more
prototype those ideas as quickly as we could have. I think we did well in that we did run through this game a few iterations. We incorporated feedback and we figured out, and we had plenty of ideas that we could have changed. One idea, for example, was each environment, there's 5 separate environments, they all have their own individual life counters. We didn't get a chance to try that, but at the same time, there's an idea that we could explore in the future. What else we do?
And that's really it. We worked really. We could have had play testers a little more, and we worked really well. We had a lot of great feedback.
So what made it so that you guys worked really well? Is it just like spontaneously happening because you were?
Well, I think
all of us were just very open to listening to other people's ideas.
And I think part of it too is it was really interesting that we kept true to the original concept. It was originally pitched as Captain Planet Goes Rogue kind of thing. So we kept the basic premise intact, and I think falling back to that original idea, it's like sometimes we'd introduce an idea. It's like, well, that doesn't really fit our original vision. It's like, so let's try to keep things moving forward. It worked well. And, yeah, so I think we hit all the points.
I know you guys have both designed games before. Was there something in doing this game jam that you're like, oh, that's actually new? I might actually try and incorporate that in how I'm designing games.
This is your second jam ever. I've done several game jams, and it's like this. I find it very interesting that at the very beginning of this jam, we did a lot of
Workshops.
exercises to really practice rapid prototyping. It's something I'm not used to doing. I didn't expect it coming in here, and I thought that was really an interesting process and something certainly learn from and try again more often.
Yes, this is my second game jam, but I design games in my own time a lot, and I very often I'll do 8 different iterations of the game in an hour because I often do it by myself, so it's really easy to just mentally run through those things. So be able to just better communicate these things to other people makes it a lot easier to make new prototypes and save mechanics that work in the micro piece of a greater mechanic.
Anybody got a question?
Yeah, what would you have done differently?
I think, like we said, we had lots of ideas to explore. If we had, just say, okay, let's just do it, run it once, and then let's do it the other way, run it that way, and we did a lot more discussion than we did actual just run-throughs of various ideas.
I think we're good, because we only have a couple seconds left.
Thank you very much.
So, yeah.
I'm going to play with lights while we set up.
Rory would be the
So Tim and Dan from Green Team Revolt, their third member was Rory, who was there yesterday. One thing I forgot to ask is if you guys can just introduce yourself, just short, just hey, this is my name and this is why I'm here. So now that the Green Team Revolt is cleaning up, the next one up is going to be Legends of Bephoria.
You space me, right?
Do you need playtesters for showing them off?
If you like, or I was just planning on explaining one playthrough that happened over time, I guess. Okay. Okay, so my name's Patrick, and I made this game called Legends of Bephoria, which is a game about evolving myths and legends in the oral tradition. So in this game, players are going to be telling myths, and as play goes around, it's a 4-player game, each player is kind of going to be changing one small thing about the myth, and you see it kind of evolve as time goes on, and as turn goes on, how the myth changes from one thing to another over time. So the way the game works is that we have these myth template cards, which have templates like creature verbs a rose, causing it to grow thorns. Or a myth about that's an origin myth. We have god myths. The god of domain, disguised as creature, creates object to help mankind. Or what's some other ones? Some boogeymen myths. Creature or object turns into creature or object to deceive lost travelers. And so what you would do is you have these kind of other cards to fill it in. So you have adjectives, domains, creatures, verbs, and objects. So for example, you would say the god of music, disguised as a snail, creates umbrella to help mankind. And so then a player would have to tell a story, tell a short story. The first player would have to tell a short story about how this myth happened and why that is a worthwhile thing to pass down through humanity. So after player 1 tells that myth, the kind of, I guess, fiction that is overlaid on this game is that the player who first tells the myth is kind of a historian who is trying to tack down, the origins of this myth and preserve it for the next generations. So they call in, some storytellers who also are familiar with this myth, who may remember it, growing up hearing this myth, they might remember it a little differently, so they might retell the myth in a slightly different way. So an example that came up yesterday that I really liked was a boogeyman myth. Adjective creature uses object to punish disobedient children. And the things that we started with was, see, we had a cat, and it was a scary cat. So you can see the adjective words kind of have a few words to kind of help you kind of describe the thing that the myth is about, so you can kind of be a little lenient with that. And then the object was a frying pan. So the myth was a scary cat uses a frying pan to punish disobedient children. So the way player 1 told the story was growing up, my grandmother would always tell me, never to steal food at night, don't eat late at night, because if you do, then, as you reach into the pantry, you'll feel a brushing against your leg and hear a hissing, and you'll see a cat in the corner, and if you try and reach for the food, the cat will hiss at you and try and scratch you, and it'll startle you so much that you'll jump up and you'll hit your head on a frying pan that's hanging. So that was a little urban myth, legend that was passed down to generations. And so the historian after that will then ask the storytellers to kind of help them, what was the version of the myth that you know? I mean, this version is kind of a little fuzzy, I haven't heard it in a long time. So then play passes to the storyteller, and the first storyteller is going to draw new cards. So they're going to draw an adjective, a creature, and an object. And then what they're going to do is they're going to pick one card from here and replace one word in the prompt with a word that they drew, and then tell a new story. So in this example, the player drew woman, and so they change cat to woman. So what they do is they then tell a new story, which is, I remember growing up, I heard this story too. My grandmother would always warn me not to eat late at night, not to steal food. So what she told me was that if you go into the kitchen at night and you try and grab some food from the pantry, you'll actually see a scary witch off in the corner, and she'll warn you, don't steal that food. And if you decide to ignore her and you do, and you reach into the pantry, she will hiss at you like a cat. She will bare her claws to try and scratch you, and that'll startle you so much that you'll put your head in the frying pan. And so what player 2 did there was kind of incorporate the old elements and then add in the new element to say I can see how you thought it was a cat, but it actually was a woman who used the frying pan to punish children. And so they choose woman. Then the next player goes, and the next player will draw new cards again and say instead of frying pan they chose coconut. So then they might tell a story about how there's this cat and it frightens you if you try and steal some food, and then it throws a coconut at you instead of hitting your head on the frying pan. And so after each player goes, the historian listens to 3 variations and chooses the story that they like the best, the story that kind of reminds them the most of the story that they originally told, and then that version of the story, so example woman, becomes the new canonical version that then travels through the ages for the next 50 or 100 years. And so then that's the end of round 1, and then round 2, it's 100 years later, or 100 years later, and everyone, in the world has grown up listening to the story about, the woman who, hits people with frying pans when children are disobedient. And so this new historian, who is now, on the right, asked the storytellers to tell a new version of the story. So now no longer was there any cat mentioned in the story. They all grew up knowing about this woman. However, instead of frying pan, maybe it's a book. Or maybe instead of a scary woman, it's, an angry woman or an ugly woman or something like that. And so each round you get a new historian, a new word replaces to be the canonical version. Each turn is a new 100 years or so. And so as you go through until everyone has a chance being the historian, at which point it's like 200 years later and the myth has now changed. And then at that point you would grab a new myth. So creature, verbs, a creature or object, creating the seasons. And so then you would play the game again, going from there and making a new myth. And so that is the basic point of the game. And whoever I guess, made the most changes to the story, like the historian chose their story to be the new canonical version, they get a point. At the end of maybe 2 myths, whoever has the most points would be the winner. Yeah. And then, let's see, what I did well. When the theme was introduced as cooperation, I kind of already had this mechanic in mind of shared storytelling, in particular of handing down myths, which is like a cooperative thing of people always telling other people the same myth that they know, and then kind of comparing other kinds of variations and things. So I already came up with this mechanic pretty soon on, and the main mechanic of this hasn't actually changed that much. What I did change was kind of how people like tell the stories, like what things they have to include, or just to kind of give the game a little more structure. And I've changed, the beginning and end, and especially trying to figure out how to score the game was a huge thing that I was kind of struggling with, because I want to give people incentive to tell good stories, but I don't want to, turn storytelling into a system. Like if you include this and this and this, you get 3 points, or I give you a point to the funniest story or the most entertaining story or something like that. Let's see what else. What I learned. I learned that making a game with no systems and numbers is really interesting, I guess, because instead of a balancing game or changing around numbers, which is what I normally do with my game designs, it mostly became about creating content. So trying to think of, what are some myth templates, what are some good adjectives and objects that can be put into these myths that people can have a lot of fun with, which is a very much more difficult problem, or not much more difficult, but a different problem than what I'm usually concerned with when I'm making games. And it's very fun to see how people, take a story and make their own spin on it and use other variations, and that's always watching people play is always really fun.
Time for one very quick question. So I know you had a game design partner the first day.
Yeah.
What was interesting in working together with that person on the game?
Well, her name was Mary Jane. She said that she wasn't very well versed in game design, which I think this game actually was pretty helpful in having this be her first game jam, because instead of talking about like hard mechanics and stuff like that, we kind of just discussed like what are some good story elements, and like we play tested a lot, telling each other stories, and that was really easy for her, and she seemed to enjoy that. But she wasn't able to make it today. Yeah, it was pretty fun. We just kind of like helped each other kind of create all the different cards that we had in the game.
So I'm guessing this game has gotten a new name since it was originally pitched. Scenario?
That's me.
Okay, hey.
Okay, so demo. Do I have any volunteers?
Sure.
Okay, I'll need a second person. Okay. Okay. So this is actually an audience participation game, so the rest of you do have something to do too. All right. So You two are the actors, and each actor will draw one of these red cards. Each red card lists 3 constraints to choose from. There's an easy, a medium, and a hard. And so the actors will each choose a constraint and announce the one that they're doing to the audience.
I'm gonna say in a ig pay atenlay.
Okay, speak Pig Latin. So that would be the 2-point medium constraint.
So every sentence I'll be saying will contain a word that rhymes with light.
Okay, that's also a medium constraint. So each of those are worth 2 points. All right, now you draw a blue card. So, okay, read it out.
Ig pay aberire.
Bank robbery. That's,
Right.
That's so
bank
weird because
robbery.
every time we play testing, people keep drawing bank robbery. This is optional. Should we add a setting card?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so draw a yellow card.
All right.
Just fun. And that is
On top of Mount Everest.
okay. So you're robbing a bank on top of Mount Everest. And all right, so you're going to have 1 minute for which you have to keep up this scene without breaking your constraint. So, and the audience is going to keep a judge of that. So they have to make sure every sentence you say contains a word that rhymes with light, and they have to make sure that you keep speaking in Pig Latin the whole time. So if somebody breaks their constraint, you call out that person's name to indicate it. And if the actors go for more than 10 seconds without participating in the scene, then call out scene fail. And so the actors will both get points if they complete the scene successfully. If one of them breaks their constraint, only the other actor will get points. And neither of them gets points if they let the scene lapse. So I'll pull up the timer. All right, you ready? Yeah, all right, you have 1 minute. Go.
Right. Do you think it's dark enough tonight?
Definitely day.
I was like, wow, by the way, look at this height.
Art stay igging day.
What? I don't think I got you quite right.
Art stay igging day.
Oh, dig with all my might.
SCA.
Do you think if we get in that we need to fight?
Definitely day.
Don't you hate that, right?
Erde are gay. Ards gay.
I don't think I got that quite.
Ards gay.
Art's gay? Light? Is that what we need? Yeah, I don't have. Did you bring a flashlight? Because it's gonna be dark down there tonight.
Idde uye ring bay asks
Okay.
me.
Time. Okay, congratulations, you both made it through the scene, which means you each get 2 points. And then, yeah, so if we were to keep this game going, being the actors would rotate among the audience members, and you would try to rack up the highest score.
Can we?
Yeah, you can sit down.
I was cheating, I'm an improviser.
Yeah, so the core of this has been fairly solid throughout. I wanted to do kind of an improv party game where people would have some limitation on what they could do in the scene, and they had to keep to that. So it started out being a date scenario, and then it kind of broadened it to where you could have a bunch of different scenes acted out. Originally, I think there was going to be a goal, like there was something you communicate to the other player, and that kind of kept coming up through the process. But I found pretty consistently that I was having a hard time making something that would work such that with the maximum number of constraints, because coming up with constraints was definitely the hardest part. That there is still a really small deck of constraints, and if I was adding, there's like a sentence you have to get the other player to say or something, or communicate a message, then there are a lot of constraints that don't actually limit what words you're allowed to say, and therefore would still be very easy. And then there's also a lot of constraints where it'd still be ridiculously hard. So I felt like to keep the maximum number of constraints in play, I had to leave off that feature. Probably the biggest change, I think, was instead of just drawing a card with one constraint, you get to choose from 3. And this is pretty much solely because of the speak in iambic pentameter constraint, which got more complaints than any other, including some of the really hard ones. So I decided that I was going to give players the option of not doing a particular constraint if it was one that they really didn't feel up to. So then I had to kind of decide which were easy, medium, and hard. And turned out it had a lot of medium and quite a few hard, and then I need to come up with more easy ones. And some of them actually are not hard necessarily, but sort of embarrassing. Like nobody seems to want to sing all their lines. So I bumped that up to a 2 just for the embarrassment factor to reward people for attempting it. Let's see. So I don't really do a lot of non-digital games, so it was kind of fun for me to have adventures in paper prototyping with this. Let's see. Oh, so the setting deck was a fairly late addition, and I still think it could be pretty much optional, but it's sometimes an interesting addition to the scene to throw in a setting. That's mostly it. Any questions? Yeah?
If you were to have more time, another day, or perhaps another week, what do you think you would be doing with that?
Probably brainstorming more constraints, because that deck is still really thin, especially since I decided to put 3 on each card. Yeah.
Great. What surprised you? What did you expect to happen in the process?
I kind of find it interesting how different people sort of reacted to different aspects of it. Like, I guess there were some constraints that I didn't expect to be quite so hard, or people to be quite so reluctant to do sometimes. Yeah, I was surprised how hard it was when I came down to it, when I had to think of more easy constraints. Because it was tricky coming up with hard ones, but then I had to come up with ones that weren't really all that hard, and I realized I didn't have ideas for those either. Yeah. Oh, I had a second team member, Lucas, who isn't here now, but name check him.
Yeah, I wasn't to collaborate on that game with somebody you've never met before.
Yeah. So mostly we were trying to do some brainstorming to fill out the cards, and we did the first few play tests ourselves, which is when we discovered pretty quickly that the communicate a message to the other player didn't work out very well. Originally, before we had the cards, we just had a list, and we used random number generator, said, okay, we are now doing number 4.
So, hello, Uncle. Yes.
Hi, so my name is Andrew, and I worked on this game with 2 other people who couldn't be here right now, with Kathleen and Greg. And it's a game around. Yep.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a game based around the concept of you are a bunch of disparate cousins who have gone away to school, and you've shown up for a family reunion. And while you each know some of the members of your family, you don't all know every member of your family. So you need to sort of work together to make sure you don't embarrass yourself by talking to your family members and calling them by the wrong names, basically. So the idea is that there's each player, there are these cards that detail your family members, and each player is dealt out, like this entire deck is dealt out, so each member of the family is accounted for. And there's a central deck that's drawn from where it's either a family member that's pulled or an event card. And when you draw a family member, that's when they start a conversation with you. And if you know who they are, you can just like say, oh, hi, this is Susan. Oh, hi, Susan. And they will leave your sort of conversational area, and then they're free, and you're not talking to anyone anymore. But if you don't know who they are, they're stuck in your conversation track. And you're just sitting there talking about small talk. Okay, yeah, hi. And it just keeps going like that. So the next player will draw, and the next player, until the point, eventually, if you have up to 3 people in your track, that's do or die. You're talking to too many people, you're juggling all these family members. You need to say, oh, I'll be with you in a minute, Uncle Bob. But that's not Uncle Bob, that's actually your grandfather, and his name is actually Henry. So you get really embarrassed and you get an embarrassment token. So after either any player accumulates 3, or all the players accumulate like a total of like players times 2, then you all get too embarrassed. You're gonna sit in the couch like on your phone for the rest of the game, for the rest of the night, and just not talk to anyone, and just mind your own business, because you'll wait for next year. Try again a little better. So the event cards are things that sort of like shake up the game by saying, like everyone sits down for dinner, so all the conversations that you have are picked up and shuffled and dealt back out as everyone meets new people as they sit around the dinner table. But additionally, if you know that someone's talking to you, you can go and help them by, if your conversation track is clear, I could go, like basically walk over and be like, oh hi, that's my my sister Susan, and then like that saves that person. They don't have to worry about that. But if things are getting really desperate, and say this person's got 2 embarrassment tokens, and I've got like 1, I'm not doing too bad. I can sort of rudely push my conversations aside, just like, I'll get to you later, and say, this is my cousin Susan. So that person saves them the embarrassment of not knowing who that is, but I take my own because I rudely exited the conversation. So originally how this game worked was, it was kind of like this weird cooperative guess who kind of game where all these people, if you can see, they have like individual traits on them. Yeah. Anyway, they have individual traits on them as legacy from that design. So you place down this trait, and you would have to like, you would say like, oh, age 8, blonde hair, and that's a boy. And on additionally say it was a clue, like, number 27 has red hair, which meant that you had like 50 clues that everyone had to keep track of, and no one wanted to look at that because you had all these notes and nothing was ever cleared, because even when you cleared someone, you still needed their clues, so nothing was ever removed from the board. And so you had like 30 pieces from the board, and we threw that away because that didn't work. And then we eventually wound up here where these, like right now it's text, but like in an ideal situation, these would just be pictures, and you would have pictures in your hand and just be picture matching. And all the deduction is sort of gone. It's more about based on, I guess, cooperative go fish almost, where you have to sort of match. Everyone's got everything we need, and we just need to make sure we've got the right relatives, or we can match the right ones to each other. And working with, I've done one other game jam, like in the local one with other people. I've done a lot of online ones. But working with other people is really helpful because you can learn when an idea is really bad right away. Because someone in your group will say, no, that doesn't work at all. And or you can rapidly play test with someone, and we're like, there's 30 scattered pieces of paper everywhere, and none of these are working. I don't want to look at all these. We need to organize a grid spreadsheet just to play this game. And no one wants to open Excel in the middle of playing a casual board game. But otherwise, I think like being able to rapidly iterate, we actually didn't have a workable game at the end of yesterday, but starting today, like I guess sleeping on it, we all sort of came to this sort of conclusion of a game that's actually sort of workable and playable. Right now, when we started the day, it was balanced too hard and no one was winning. Now it's balanced too easy and everyone's winning. So we need to sort of find that happy balance where you win sometimes and you lose sometimes, but you know why you won or lost, and it's not just completely random. And so I think what we did well was we worked on the theme. It was a theme we sort of liked, and we didn't throw out like the broad concept, and we kept working around that. It just took a long time to make that concept into a game that was playable. I think that's it. It's pretty much the game. Any? Hi.
So how replayable is it? I mean, can you get to a point where you've played the game so many times that you know all the relatives?
That's actually the problem we came to last night, and that's where we fixed it by saying it's just picture matching now. So even if I know, like even if I personally myself know, like that's my little baby cousin Timmy, like I don't have the baby cousin Timmy card, so I can't actually remove him myself. So it's not so much about naming them as it is having the card in hand to be able to remove them. That's how, because yeah, so like everyone, you can, yeah, if you can memorize, if you know these people's names better than your own family, that's fine. You can actually win through that, which was the problem we had last night, where it was like, we can just win by just memorizing all these people's names. That's how we got around that. Cool. All right.
Cool. Thank you.
No problem.
So, 25 finger discount. You want to, by the way, you want to give a shout out to who your other?
Yeah, it was Greg and Kathleen. I don't know their last names. I have Greg's email.
I noticed watching this on Twitch. So.
Yes, I don't remember it. Goranson, I believe, or something very close to that.
Goranson.
Maybe you're.
So
right.
if you were playing this game with them, it wouldn't work out.
Right, exactly. Well, I would know their first name. That's close enough.
All right.
Do you need help setting up?
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, you need help with that?
Yeah. I think so.
If you want, I'll set it up.
Sure. Well, I mean, so I guess I can talk about the process a little bit now while we're setting it up. Originally, this game was going to be a heist game that was completely cooperative. It was each player had like a different role. You had like the safe cracker, you had the demolitions expert, you had the person who disables all the security cameras, and that very quickly just disappeared because we realized it would be very difficult to handle any AI. Like originally we had like a couple of police officers wandering around. And in our first playtest, we quickly realized it was very difficult to make the police officers smart enough to catch the players, but also not so smart that they would just immediately catch the players. And we decided for more of at that point, it was a competitive game that was just not really cooperative at all. Everybody's just going for their own gold. But there wasn't a lot of strategy to it, so that's where we brought it back again. So it's a 2v2 game where each robber is trying to collect 10 gold for their team, at which point they'll win. But as the game goes on, the more you collect gold, there's a danger meter that goes up and heist cards get played that affect everybody because the police start to notice you're stealing things. And also every time players on their own collect gold, there's like action cards that you can play to prevent the other players from doing things, prevent the other team from winning. So there's a lot of rules, but we'll just go through a couple turns here. So at the start of the game, there's going to be two teams. So we'll have over here a team with white and black, and a team with blue and red. I'll play the team with white and black, and my assistant here will play the blue and red team. So each roll a die to determine who goes first. So he rolled 6, so he'll go first. He'll place the blue player on any door square. And then I'll place a player here. Okay, so now we've started the game. So first blue player will go. And he'll choose, I don't know if you can see the die. He rolls 2 die. He chooses one of those die, whichever one is higher. So 6, and he can move that many spaces and use, he gets them action points. Each action point is either moving a space or picking up a piece of gold. And a player can hold 3 gold at a time. They can walk back to one of the exits to deposit that gold, at which point they get an action card and it goes to their bank and they'll get an upgrade and all that kind of thing. So I'll go next for the white player. So I get a 4, 1, 2, 3. I'll just pick up this gold. We'll just kind of go really quickly through those turns so we get to the meat of the game here. Right. 6. Okay, so it's the end of a round, but since none of us has collected any gold yet, we don't get any upgraded cards yet. Oh, which you also can't see. Let me put those there. These are the different kinds of cards. There's the upgrade cards, which actually we decided that there'll be 3 upgrades that you can choose from when you get upgrades. There's the action cards that you get for returning gold, and there's the heist cards which get activated when it's 2 turns. All right, so we got 4. So not quite there yet. All right, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I put this gold in my team's loot pile. I put an upgrade token on because I'll be upgrading it. My team will get an upgrade at the end of this round. And then I draw an action card and I place a counter on the danger meter. So once that gets to 5, there will be a heist card. I'll just show you this card. So the different kinds of action cards, there's different area of effects. Some affect a zone of the board. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Some affect a chosen player. And some just affect the entire board. Most action cards you can just play on your turn. Some, like this one. Oh no, this one I can play on my turn. So I could... This one, but it's only an area of effect zone. So I'm playing white right now. There's nobody else in my zone, so I can't use it. But if there was somebody else in my zone, I'd be able to take their gold and put it on my character instead. So now you go through the gray that are on top of the gold. Those are locked cases. Later on, there's an upgrade you can get to unlock cases, which will make that gold accessible. The reason that those are locked is because they're much closer to the doors. So you can, once you get that unlockability, you can just quickly grab that gold and go out and just get a bunch of get a bunch of action cards and hopefully upgrade cards. 6. Where is it? So he's just going to go 1, 2. I'm going to start moving over here. 3, 4, 5, 6, and try and get out that door. All right, now it's the end of a round. Because my team got gold this turn, they're going to get an upgrade. I'll choose from one of these 3. We have just a general upgrade that adds 2 to my movement dice roll. There's an upgrade, rollerblades, where if I can choose to only move vertically or horizontally, and then I get to move twice as much as normal. And then there's an upgrade that lets me carry 2 more gold at a time. I'm going to choose that for my black player because he is right near these other 2 golds, so he can carry a lot. So he'll just have that. Now the upgrades just stay forever. So
that's 1.
okay. So oh yeah, you got
4, 5.
So again, he's going to have an upgrade next turn. Danger counter increases, and you get an action card. So we'll just try and play until we can at least get a heist card, or maybe we can just do. I guess in the interest of time, we'll just play the heist card now. So once this meter is going to get filled, there's going to be a powerful heist effect. In this case, it says marked bills. Each team with the most gold that's banked loses gold until they have as much as the other players. In this case, we both have 1. So it says if they're tied, each team loses 1. And then we put that many counters on the danger meter. So that one is kind of, hopefully comes up a little later in the game. It can kind of really affect the game a lot. Most cards do not affect the bank gold. For example, the next one just says all the safes can be used as if they were unlocked. So a lot of really powerful effects that affect how you're going to play the next round, how you're going to play the rest of the game. And the goal, again, is to have your team get 10 gold before the other team. So all that was added. Some of it was in like the last 2 hours of yesterday, like 2 hours after we had decided to change the game entirely. And then like half of it was added this morning where I was here not with my other team members. But I think a lot of it we had kind of discussed at that time where we wanted to have a lot more stuff happen in the game. The initial game we had was very simple, very kind of slow. You could only roll 1 dice to move, and you were just picking up gold. There was something that happened at the end of every round, but it wasn't as drastic as some of these cards are now. There wasn't really a lot of interaction with the other players, which we have now. So I think that's something we did really well, was just scrapping everything that wasn't really that interesting, that wasn't really even if it was kind of on theme with our original idea, I think we decided, I think at some point we said if we could come up with a trust mechanic. Our original idea was like all the robbers, you know, they can steal from each other, so you don't really know how to trust. But we couldn't come up with a trust mechanic, so we just said, okay, we don't have a trust mechanic, let's just do this as it is and make it as best as we can. So I guess what we learned is to start with something that we know the mechanic for, something that we know we can do, and just kind of build on it a little more from there, rather than starting off with something that was like a kind of a vague idea and we've seen other games do it well, but we don't know exactly how we would do it. I think the other people on my team, I don't know them by name, unfortunately, but they designed this board game called Aegis, which is they're self-published by them, so you should be able to look it up and find out their names. So I think they had a little more experience in that area of knowing which mechanics work and which don't, so that helped a lot. What was interesting was seeing all the different reactions people had to the different events. We got, I think, over the course, we had, every time we play tested, we had like a different group play testing. So it was really good to see all the different perspectives of people, how they all viewed the game. You know, some people may have thought it was too slow, some thought it was too fast, but I think in the end we kind of got a good pace. Even if it's not perfectly balanced, we got something that was workable and interesting and had a good play time.
All right, very cool. In time, interest of time. So we're already at the last game. I'm kind of sad. So the Meek Inherit the Earth is not going to be on the document camera because it's gigantic. So Don and Eli, take it away.
Thanks. So I am Eli.
I'm Don.
Yeah, we are both part of the Game Makers Guild, which, like Arian said, is a great place to check out if you're interested in learning more about indie games. We actually worked at a game jam together, a global game jam.
Yep.
And the theme that we wanted to tackle this time was really getting at the heart of how to fix quarterbacking in cooperative games. That's like my #1 issue with playing games like Pandemic and things along those lines. So I was excited to get to fix it. The initial pitch that we were working with was our way of preventing players from sort of dominating the game was by preventing the things that they could say on another person's turn. But the idea was to do this in sort of a thematic way, such that so we thought about the different ways that people quarterback, and the idea was that if a player was to point at a certain location, maybe an enemy would spawn there. Or if they were to say, I, me, or my, then they would suffer some sort of consequence. And that these sorts of hampering effects would add up on players who were doing well in the game or dominating discussion in the game.
And very early on, I was like, well, do those always have to be negative? Maybe they could be positive. So like pointing at something may destroy something there, but maybe you want to destroy something so you can use that area.
Exactly. We wanted these effects to still be fun, even though they were preventing you from doing certain things.
Yeah.
And I guess we can briefly talk about, before we get into the full game, the solution that we ended up with was these power cards, which essentially give the player who draws them some sort of positive benefit, but for everybody else in the game who can look at this card in front of that person, it provides some detriment if they take a certain action outside of their turn, which is when we decided most quarterbacking actually happens.
And so for this example, when you say I on at any time, you can get a new piece. But if anyone else says is I, they lose a piece. Or no, they don't lose a piece. A bad piece gets added to their home base.
So why don't you talk about what all those things mean?
So this is the game. It's a worker placement co-op party game, which is like a lot of things trying to go on at once. And so I'll just explain some of the mechanics. So we've got these blue cards that illustrate what you do on your turn. So there's sort of this evil group, the black pieces, all the pieces are cultists, so the black ones are sort of like cultists of an evil group. And they can convert your followers, so I'm orange in this case. At the very beginning of the turn, each black piece will convert one of my pieces. So there's a black piece here, so he converts my orange piece to a black piece, which is pretty bad. Then I get all my followers back. And then you roll a die to determine where a new evil cultist shows up. In this case it's 15, so one would get added at this location because it has the number 15 on it. And then if you had any powers that you had previously used, you get to refresh them so you can use them again. And then you can use your followers, and you can use any number of them. So for example, I could place my followers here to get another token here. And these tokens can prevent the rolling to add more followers or more cultists. And that's really the meat of the game. There's 2 ways to lose, 1 way to win. The ways to lose is if all of these black pieces get put onto the board, then the evil guys have had enough pull that they destroy everything. The other way to lose is if you lose all of your pieces, as in, so you're a god. If you lose all your pieces, you no longer exist because no one believes in you. And so that's another way to lose. And the only way to win is if collectively, because you're a polytheistic culture, if collectively you have a certain number of pieces, then you as a team win. That's the basic gameplay.
Yeah, it's got the basic flow of a worker placement game where over the course of time you're accumulating more power, more powerful locations and things for you to do with your workers.
Right. And like some people can take the role of being more supportive, so they may not have a lot of workers to place, but they've been doing really crucial turns, or they may be the person that's, I'm going to build up my army so that later on I can just do a ton of really big actions, like take a location that requires a lot of workers to convert an enemy to your side.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The final game that we ended up with is pretty simple to win in general, but it has a good party feel to it in that if you start saying these things, then the punishments rack up very quickly and you will lose. And that happened to us several times.
Pretty much any time we played 2 players, we would just start saying the words on the other person's cards unintentionally and racking up the black pieces and dying.
Often in awful chains where you would say the word I and then you'd be like, oh, I messed up, and then just terrible things cascade into each other. But it still had a strangely entertaining feel to it. Like, right. You wanted to go back and try again rather than just being frustrated because it is still a pretty light game.
Yeah. So something with that is that we had initially had global ones that affect everyone no matter what, and they're all negative. And that was, we determined that that was a little too much too early, and it was, it just always felt bad when that happened.
Yeah.
Whereas if those were linked to positive items, then it wasn't like, we have this bad thing that can happen because we get this really good thing that can happen.
Yes, because some of these effects are quite powerful and you can't really win the game without them. So we always go after them first and then they end up shooting us in the foot. But, and then the other important thing about these is that we really wanted to make them work in such a way that they did not just destroy new players. Because in certain iterations where the power cards were affecting the player who had the card in front of them, at all times, a new player on their turn wouldn't be able to ask questions or figure out what's going on because they're so occupied with thinking about what is going on in this card, which was no good.
Yeah. So on their turn, they can do anything. They disregard all the powers. When it's not their turn, all the powers affect them.
Yeah, and this was pretty effective at keeping people from not talking on turns where quarterbacking would happen. We had players like playing with their hands shut so that they didn't point at anything in particular. And I found myself, rather than just like blabbering on like I normally would, giving much more considerate and reasoned like help to the other players because I had to stop and think about what I was going to say.
There's a couple times where I started to quarterback and then missed a couple words and was like, oh, we just got 2 more pieces added to the board.
Yeah, right. So it does give another way for like newer players to kind of feel good about doing well because the older ones are just
they're
the
ones that's ruining the game. So one of the things about this game was initially yesterday we didn't really like the game until after dinner. because we had a lot of different.
Drinks.
Well, we had a few drinks, but it was also like we had a lot of different mechanics going on, like different ways to kind of build out the world that you live in, but they're kind of clunky and just a lot of things visually. So after dinner, we just took everything, threw it away, and made new ones, and we're pretty happy with it. And started this morning with that. And basically, we would play it, take 10-15 minutes to talk about it while writing new cards or tweaking the cards that we have, and then we'd play it again.
Yeah. Yeah, which was a very different experience from our first game jam that we did, where the first prototype we made was like pretty good and we just kind of went forward with it. But it's good to see that just because the first iteration is pretty crappy doesn't mean that there can't be something good that comes out of it.
Right. So something else that we did was usually worker placement games involve like 10 different currencies. Something that we wanted to do to keep it simple enough to understand what the balancing that needs to happen is and understand that it is a good game or it is a bad game, was we only have the one currency of your workers. So your workers are your victory points, your workers are your money, your workers are your ability to do things on your turn.
Right. We weren't sure if that would be possible to make a game with just a single resource, but we found a lot of interesting ways to leverage that resource. So sometimes either getting rid of it or converting it into separate resources or just increasing the rate at which that resource is acquired. You can do a lot with worker cubes.
Yeah. So what else?
I guess, right. Just our final really big takeaway was learning how different genres can interact in weird ways. Like you said at the very start, worker placement, party game aren't normally things you think about going together, nor are worker placement and cooperative. So it was fun to try that out.
Oh, and something that I found really useful that was suggested at the beginning, and I was reminded later on when I started to write down on a piece of paper our rules, was to write them down on postcards. So like our turn order is all on postcards, and originally we had them in a different order, and it made it really easy to just swap them around and see how that felt. And because like originally we had refresh powers first, so you could use your powers to stop the later points of the start of the turn, and so the cultists would always just be hosed.
Yeah, so keeping things modular was a good way to develop it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to do a shameless self-promotion. So I'm part of a board game company called I4 Games, like EYE number 4 games. We've got a Kickstarter for a wizarding tennis game coming out in 2 weeks. So find our website, it's just i4games.com. Look for us on Kickstarter.
And the game is called?
Alaka Slam.
Right. Thanks, Brett. So everybody, thank you very much for being here. It was, for me at least, very enjoyable to see everybody go through some of the brainstorming exercises that Rick led at the beginning. It's been very interesting to see where the original pitches ended up and to see how the game's changed over the several iterations. I don't have much to say other than, again, thanks for being here, making this a cool, what?
The festival.
Yeah, making this a cool event. Another thing is, if you're watching and you're interested in making games, one of the best places to go to, aside from the Game Makers Guild or talking to the MIT Game Lab, is the Boston Festival of Indie Games, September 13th. Check it out at bostonfig.com. We have showcase submissions are open, which means you basically, if you have a game, and it's a lot of, okay, if it's like a rough prototype, you can submit it to the festival. You'll get feedback, like page-long feedback with advice and from professional game designers or publishers or game design researchers, so basically people who actually know something about games. If you make it into the festival as well, you'll get a table for the whole day to demo your game to your heart's content. And on top of that, you can also just like basically sell it if you feel like it. And last year we had around 7,000 visitors, around 100 game designers, basically everybody playing games, lots of fun. So check it out. Woo.
Bye.